Today's guest is Jonathan Hamlet. He's a Senior Procurement Executive at the Millennium Challenge Corporation, which is a federal agency for those of you who've never heard of it. Jonathan has worked at 6 different federal agencies in his career, and he even did a stint at Booz Allen Hamilton, which is for a lot of people, a check mark. You need to have one of those big agency or big organizations outside the government. Jonathan and I met when I worked at MCC, and I'll tell you, Jonathan, I just bragged about this before we started recording. You're one of the best procurement people I've ever worked with. You're very friendly, you're very knowledgeable, and you're willing to help us get the job done. So I do miss working with you, but it's great for you to come on the podcast. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, Jeremy. I'm certainly looking forward to the discussion.
So for people who don't know you, talk a bit about your background. Talk about where you're from, who you are, and what you do.
Well, starting, I guess, from the beginning, I am from I'm from Chesapeake, Virginia, so down in the Norfolk Hampton Roads sort of area is where I hail from. And from there, I went to undergrad at UVA, went to grad school in Syracuse.
Hmm.
That was a shift weather-wise for sure, but it was nice to it was nice to take in some of that beautiful snow and the frost belt, as they call it. But yeah, I think that through that time period, in undergrad and then grad school, I kind of had decided that I wanted to do something kind of public sector related with my career. I wasn't exactly sure what that was going to be for a while, but I did know that I kind of wanted to work in the public sector or the nonprofit sector. That kind of crystallized when I was in grad school. I went to the Maxwell School in Syracuse, which is a school to get the master's in public administration. So there I kind of started to get exposed to some different areas I could go into in terms of public sector work. Did I want to go into public finance? Did I want to go into state and local? Did I want to go in international even? And I had come out of there dead set on wanting to go to work in state and local government. And that was kind of how I had been leaning. But in sort of the or the early 2000s, when I came out of grad school, the economy was not great.
Right.
And a lot of state and local agencies weren't hiring. So I started looking at federal jobs. Initially, I had been looking at budget jobs because I had been taking a lot of classes in budgeting and finance. But then I saw an opportunity for an 1102 contract specialist. And to be frank, I had no idea what that job was, what they did. But I started reading the job announcement on good old USA Jobs, and it sounded kind of interesting. And I applied to it, and I had like sort of a vague idea what it might be about, because one of the things that they covered in grad school was, as part of public sector reform, outsourcing, contracting out. So I knew it had to do something with that. So yeah, I interviewed for the job, and it was really interesting because it was one of those. It was, I remember it was a phone interview. And I could tell there were like 14 people in the room or something like that. It was one of those really sort of old school government phone interviews that we don't really have anymore because everyone's on screen nowadays. But this was back when dinosaurs roamed the earth and we had conference calls all the time. But yeah, basically, I was very interested in the job, as I was really interested in any job, to be honest, at the time. But I had a couple other things I was looking at, but they kind of sold me on it. It was a unique opportunity. The program I was going into gave me a chance to do 6-month rotations at different government departments, not even rotations in just the same agency. So I thought this will be a great way to get exposure working in a bunch of different places. And I'll probably learn something different at each place. And boy, howdy did I, because one of the earliest lessons of my career is that it's kind of like that old line with economists, like get two economists and you get three opinions or whatever. Like
Right.
it's the same thing with contracting officers, and how they interpret the FAR, how they do contracting. And it's not that there's anything wrong with that. There's usually multiple right answers to the question. But I learned really quickly that there was no real one way to do a given uh, sort of procurement. And that stuck with me. And it's been a perspective I've tried to carry forward. And yeah, that's sort of how I came into the field. I wouldn't say I bumbled into it, but I definitely didn't plan on it. I did plan on doing some public sector jobs, like that kind of interested me, public service. But contracting was a field that kind of opened up to me, and I came in, and it's really what I've been doing for over 20 years now. So
Yeah, that's very interesting. I've been at a number of agencies myself, and in roles that needed to do procurement, and you're right, interact with a number of different contracting officers. Some I would hold in high esteem, and others was happy to move on and work with somebody else. And a lot of that came down to how we interpreted the FAR.
mhm.
You're right, and I think that is a misnomer. Not a lot of people understand. It's just like any other policy or regulation. There's very specific things that you have to do. There's no gray area. And then for other areas, there's a lot of interpretation in order to give agencies flexibility, I think. I think they purposely didn't get specific in some areas so that we had kind of an innovative approach to how we leverage the language. I don't know that a lot of companies realize that.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think, one of the things that I experienced in my career is I did kind of have a little burnout at one point and decided, that's when I sort of decided I would give the private sector a try. And I
Hmm.
worked for Booz Allen for a while, and I was supporting, DoD acquisition programs in what I was doing, but I was doing it on the program side. And it was an important eye opener for me,
Hmm.
because seeing how they interacted with people. But I didn't, I had kind of a similar reaction to you did to you when I was suddenly on the other side of it, and I was the one helping my clients deal with contracting officers, and the shoe was on the other foot then, and yeah, I could see, like, and DoD is known for being rigid on a lot
Yeah.
of these things, and to see sort of that rigidity, and there wasn't necessarily a lot of open-mindedness to how to deal with different types of situations and problems.
Yeah.
So it was a big change to navigate that, and a shift in perspective for sure.
It would be interesting for you to go back and experience that now because, DoD is actually known for some of their innovation now in some of their
Yes.
procurement methodologies. More so in civilian GSA is, I know, had a lot of conversations about trying to adopt some of those capabilities. The other, what is it, OTAs, I think.
OTAs,
Yeah.
yes. The hot buzzword of the minute.
So question on that program. So after that rotation, how did it come about, the decision for which agency you would work for?
It was a combination. The way that program worked, it was a combination of sort of they took into account who the agencies wanted to select of the
Hmm.
people that had rotated through and what our preferences were. So then we got a permanent placement as part of that. So yeah, my permanent placement was at HHS. So I worked there for several years after that was over. And that was a great experience, working up there, uh, and learning a lot about, HHS is one of those agencies that really has a huge sort of multi-spanning mission. And I support a lot of different HHS program offices in my role. So it's kind of interesting, learning. Sometimes that's one of the interesting things about contracting is, learning about programs you may not have even known existed.
Yeah.
But of course, you learn about all the things they're doing, and all the work that's happening. that you may not be aware of. There are parts of agencies that, through no fault of their own, are not, well known outside of a specific group of clients they serve. So.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's something that you and I have similar, right? The IT profession has that similar capability of moving to almost any agency and then having to learn the mission, right? I've done 5 agencies. Every agency had a completely different mission. And so, that first period of time at the agency is sure doing whatever the work and getting to know the people, but also trying to understand what in the world is this mission and how do I become a part of it and what's my impact.
Yeah, definitely.
So, not to get specific into what you do, but do you want to talk a little bit about MCC? Because I know not a lot of people know what MCC is.
Yeah, as our current CEO likes to say, we're a bit understood. I think we are a small dynamic agency, and that has been one of our biggest strengths as an agency. But yes, we have a mission where we establish compacts and threshold programs with partner countries that have to meet certain criteria to be eligible for those programs. And we try to, reduce poverty through economic growth. And that means focusing on programs and investments that have an economic rate of return, and will, benefit the people that need to that really won't benefit just a specific group of people, but will produce economic growth for the country as a whole. So I think that is a sort of dynamic and interesting mission. It is something that I think attracts a lot of folks to the agency. It's been something that definitely keeps me engaged at the agency and is something that I feel strongly about. And yeah, it's interesting how I came to be at MCC because, as I kind of said, you know, or when I was back in grad school, I took a number of classes on international development and thought
Mm.
about doing that. And it's something I kind of just never came back to in my career until I applied for the job at MCC. And I vaguely remember news articles about MCC being founded, back in 2004. And I was like, I remember this agency, let me see what's going on there. At that particular time, that was sort of at the tail end of my time at Booz Allen. I wasn't really looking, I wasn't aggressively job searching. I was just kind of looking at different opportunities. And I thought that opportunity was interesting. And I interviewed for it, and they kind of sold me on it. So, and yeah, now I've been there a very long time. And so clearly, it's been an agency that I've found a very engaging and interesting place to work. There are a lot of challenges with working overseas, with working in some of these partner countries, and I think that gives us an opportunity to innovate, to experience new challenges, and to do something new all the time. I think one of the traps that you can easily fall into in the sort of, or that a lot of people fall into in procurement, is sometimes you just end up working endless recompetes, and
Mm.
there's never like even a new requirement. But in MCC, we have new requirements every day. It's always, we're doing something that the agency's never done before. There's of course recurring stuff here, and that runs through things like there is with any agency, but the fact that there are always new emerging requirements makes it a unique place for sure. Because a lot of people in the procurement field don't get to experience that as part of their work.
Mm. That's a good point. I mean, especially like SEC, just generically, right? I'm not speaking for the agency, but we do 10-year contracts. Our IT contracts are 10-year contracts. So as you said, that procurement officer could have come into the agency after that contract was already in existence and left before we ever recompeted it. And so you're right, they may not have experienced a full competition, much less a brand new requirement, because
Yeah.
as you said, that's unique. That's one thing I liked about MCC was that mission, that ever-changing mission based on what countries they were working with, what the type of program is they were going to do in the country, what sector they were focused on. I tell when I tell people about MCC, I say it's one of the criteria was bottom 7% of poverty nations, which tells you right away the kind of challenges you're going to have when it comes to information technology and communications and interacting with people in those countries.
Yeah, and that's a big part of why the agency's investments can make such a big impact.
Yeah.
But it is very implementate development and implementation of those projects is always a challenge,
Hmm.
for sure. Um, so yeah, it's a dynamic place to work, and that is definitely one of the strengths of it for sure.
So, Jonathan, as you look back over your career and all of its variety and experience, what's something, or maybe more than one, something that you would go, man, I wish we did that differently. I wish there's an opportunity for efficiency gain or some thoughtfulness to go into whatever it is. And just a caveat, uh, it's not something you and I need to like solution and say, here's the right way to do that in a new way. But something we should, just generate some thought on. What's something you might see?
Well, I think going back to my experience supporting acquisition programs at DoD, I think, as I had kind of mentioned before, getting that customer perspective
Hmm.
was invaluable to me. It really changed how I thought about procurement. And it really made me look at a lot of decisions and attitudes I had in the past as a contracting officer, and made me question, was that the right way to look at things? Because understanding, I think understanding the challenges and the issues your customers deal with is, it's something that I think folks will often pay lip service to in the procurement field, but I feel like it's very important. So one thing I would always encourage folks to do, especially if they're in the procurement field, is to, if they have an opportunity to work that side of things, to do it, for whatever time you're allowed to do it, because I think you need to understand what it is from that side. You
Hmm.
need to understand, how someone else perceives the procurement process. You need to understand how, what the struggles people are with it. Because certainly looking back there, I would have been a little bit more flexible in certain circumstances. I would have tried to, maybe find different solutions in certain circumstances, but I couldn't see it
Hmm.
at that point in time because I didn't have that perspective. So I think when you look at especially procurement and acquisition, and there's always an acquisition team of different folks involved, to the extent that people have opportunities to experience take different seats at that table, I think that's invaluable, and
Hmm.
it's crucial experience. And then there was the side, being on the industry side too for bid and proposal work. Aside from what I was doing on the technical side of actually helping my clients, deal with the procurement process and work with their contracting activities. There is that side of participating in proposal writing and losing and going through all that. That's something that I think folks can get experience off of too. So I'm not saying that everyone should follow the exact career path I have, but I think that it's important from all sides, whether you're whether you're someone who works on the industry side, getting a stint in the government to understand what those folks are dealing with. And yeah, if you're a contracting person, getting an opportunity to work on the program side, I think is key, because I think as we understand the different constraints that we're all dealing with, that we get the ability to work better together. So it's kind of maybe a kumbaya kind of way of solutioning the issue, but I think working in different roles can really give you insights that you're not going to have. So yeah, but even taking it one step back from something that radical, understanding your programs is really key. Like there are times where, I'm not saying that as a contracting officer you should read every deliverable, that you should read every deliverable that a contractor turns in because you're probably working 50 contracts and you don't have time for that. But attend the status meetings, attend the other things, understand periodically what's going on. You don't have to go to all of them, but maybe the first few in a contract so you understand what's happening and how this fits. And I think to the extent where there are, final presentations associated with contracts, participate in those, go to them, see them, understand how what you did played out for people. And I think that aspect of really trying to get how it all fits together and all the pieces matter is a way to do things, and is an important way to enhance what you're able to do for your colleagues. So that's the one thing I would say in that regard. Like where I have regrets, I wish I had an opportunity or had more chances to understand the programs I supported a little better, and to walk in their shoes, because it definitely, like I said, gave me insights I would not have gotten in other ways.
Yeah, I love those suggestions. I've been a big proponent of people from government doing a stint in industry and industry doing a stint in government. I did that. I worked in after I left the military, I did a stint of time in private sector. I know exactly what you're talking about. I did a lot of proposals. I did a lot of technical presentations, and I lost a lot of work. I won some work. I did delivery on that work once we won it. And you're right. Once I came into government full time and was doing, my own procurements, I had a much better appreciation for how I should write my requirement so that
Mhm.
somebody could understand how to write a proposal for it.
Yeah, I mean, that's it's one of the interesting things, and sometimes the program office folks don't necessarily appreciate it. But I try to stand up for contractors at moments like that when you say, hey, this is not enough time for someone to write a proposal, or
Right.
when you're reading evaluation factors or something they want, you kind of sometimes have to say, how would someone respond to that? What do you imagine that looks like?
Right.
And then they kind of go, what would that look like? And so sometimes you have to ask questions like that. And that's I think once you've had those direct experiences, it gives you a better idea what kinds of questions to ask like that.
Yeah. Yeah. If you ever had to submit a proposal because the deadline was January 8th, you realize January 8th means you're working for Christmas.
Yeah.
Right. It's so frustrating. It's so
So
frustrating.
yeah, that's always something in my career I've advocated against after seeing that play out. Stop, let's not have something do, over the holiday, in the holidays, or even right after it. Let's give people some breathing room.
That's right.
So
I think it's a really interesting idea if GSA or some other large agency took on the concept of taking contracting officers and putting them on a rotation, temporary rotation through program areas.
yeah,
That would be very interesting. I know even when I was at MCC, we ended up, I think, trying to get somebody to help us be our liaison with contracting, right? And who had contract experience to help us navigate
yeah,
the language from a program office perspective as we
yes,
interact with contracting. There's a language barrier, right? There's a language barrier for contracting and understanding what all these IT terminologies mean. And then there's a language barrier for IT people to understand what all the contract language means. And so uh, I like that idea of embedding or spending some time in the program areas.
yeah. I think
Uh,
it can be very fruitful. It's tough to make work out with. I think a lot of barriers come up to that with oh, what's going to happen with billets and what's going to happen with my budget. And, people always worry about that, or you end up with, half measures like, oh, you're detailed, but it's only 25%. That's not gonna
No,
cut
that's not
the
really going to
mustard.
do
And I
it.
think it's like you have to get creative. But yeah, I think that it's worth trying to figure out, and it's worth trying to make work. But sometimes it does involve temporarily sacrificing resources. And I think, if you're a manager, I think it's something you should do that's worth it for your people. Um, because I think that's going to pay dividends for developing the folks that are working with you. And it's going to, of course, pay dividends with if it's one of the program offices you support. So I
Yeah.
think there are solutions like that that are helpful. And yeah, you see it happen here and there, but it would be nice to see a more systematic approach to that throughout, because I think that is something that is a bit lacking when you look at government wide. Like I said, there's some little programs and little opportunities that do that, but I think it should be more of a fulsome approach to making these sorts of things happen.
Yeah, it's a good idea. So, Jonathan, is there anything coming up for you here in the near future? Any idea, any big things happening?
Uh, you know, not anything terribly big. At MCC, we have selection season coming up, so that'll be interesting. What country partners will we work with next? We'll know the answer soon. So that always kicks off a flurry of activity. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out. And then otherwise, just trying to catch up on all the things we inevitably shoved aside in the chaos of the fourth quarter, and revisit them, and actually get those things done now. Hopefully, we'll be able to make all that happen. But that's what I've got looking forward to in the next few months.
And hopefully go at a real budget soon, because that also makes it easier.
Yes, it does. It does. I don't think really people out on the outside understand the management realities of dealing with continuing resolutions and partial resolutions. It's a lot of fun for everyone.
A lot of extra paperwork for contracts as you're partially funding throughout the
Partially
CRs.
fund everything.
Yeah. Well, Jonathan, I want to thank you so much. I've enjoyed getting to know you over the years and working with you, and I'm really excited for what's going on in your career.
Thank you, Jeremy, and I'm excited for you too. And it was great to catch up. You've always been a solid person to bounce ideas off of. So I know the SEC is glad to have you.